Okay, all set.
All
All right, thank you.
Good evening and welcome to the November 18th meeting of the City of Kalamazoo Zoning Board of Appeals, a volunteer board appointed by the City Commission. Tonight's meeting is being held electronically and is being streamed live on the city's Facebook page and YouTube channel. Pete, will you please conduct a roll call vote for attendance?
Yes. Ms. Doan,
Present, Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Harrington,
Present in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Flaw,
Present, Portage, Michigan.
Vanden Hamburg,
Present, Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Carroll,
Present, Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Lager.
Present, Kalamazoo, Michigan. All right. Pete, are there any announcements or changes to the original agenda?
There are no changes to the original agenda, so we can proceed with the meeting minutes.
All right, we'll move on to acceptance of the minutes then. Are there, for the board, are there any changes to the minutes? If not, is there a motion for approval?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed, same sign. All right, the motion carries. I'll now explain our procedure for tonight's public hearing. For each request, the secretary will read the application into the record. The applicant or their representative will then have 10 minutes to provide their comments. Following that, public comments received via phone will be aired for the panelists and audience. If the viewing or listening audience would like to comment on one of the public items, you can do so by calling 269-226-6573 and leave a recording. Comments received by the public hearing for a specific request will be played at the conclusion of that request public hearing. After all public comments are listened to, we will close the public hearing on the request. Once the public hearing is closed, the board will then conduct what is called a finding of fact, where the board states what they feel are the facts of the request. The board must approve the finding of fact. Therefore, the first vote you hear is not a ruling on the request, but on the finding of fact. Then the board discusses the request in order to determine a ruling. The board reserves the privilege to ask questions of persons who have already spoken, even though the public comment portion has been closed. Once discussion is ended, the board will move on to a roll call vote. A full board consists of 6 members with 4 votes required to grant a variance or any other type of request. Christina, will you read the first case into the, or our only case tonight, into the record?
Certainly, one moment, please. An application for a variance for provisions of the zoning ordinance have been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by City of Kalamazoo for 509 West Vine Street / 722 Locust Street / 802, 816, 824, and 832 Southwest Avenue, which are situated in Commercial Neighborhood District CN1. The City of Kalamazoo has been working with the Vine Neighborhood Association, property owners, and tenants since early summer of 2021 on a grant program that would provide funding for projecting signs in the Vine Neighborhood Commercial District. The city had planned to have ordinance amendments completed to the sign regulations in the fall, which would have allowed projecting signs outside the downtown. However, these ordinance amendments have been delayed until spring of 2022, and the projecting sign program is ready to move forward. The City of Kalamazoo is requesting a variance from Chapter 7, Section 7.2G to authorize projecting signs for each of the following tenant spaces, where in the CC district projecting signs mounted perpendicular to the building are not permitted at this time. 505 West Vine, 507 West Vine, 509 West Vine, 804 West Vine, 816 South Westnedge, 824 South Westnedge, 832 South Westnedge, Please note that this request will not change the zoning classification of the properties. This is a request for variance only regarding the item described above.
Thank you. And then Pete, you're presenting on behalf of the city as applicant today?
Yes, I am. Neil or Tawan, I'm not able to share my screen. I guess that would be a Neil question.
All set.
Okay, thank you. All right, can everybody see the slide clearly?
Yep.
All right. So it was already provided there in the public hearing notice. As far as the variance portion that needs to be read and voted on, just that last couple lines. We just wanted to make sure that the notices that were sent out kind of clarified, how we were getting to this dimensional variance for projecting signs. But as it was stated, this is a program that was started at the beginning of the summer. It was initiated through the Foundation for Excellence to come up with ways to support local businesses. And that then filtered down to the Vine neighborhood and the Vine neighborhood plan, which talked about the desire to have projecting signs and the goal to work with the city to get the ordinance changed to allow for projecting signs. So at the same time that our intern and our neighborhood activator were working with the business owners in the Vine commercial area, we were drafting sign regulation amendments. And the plan was to get the amendments in front of the city commission and get those reviewed and approved and allow this projecting sign program to proceed forward in the fall. And we've just got too many amendments, not only to the sign regulations but other zoning regulations that really need to be bundled together. So that is now going to wait till spring. And so the only way to keep this project going forward was to request this dimensional variance tonight. So this was, not in the cards initially. But that's where we ended up. So as I mentioned, we have the linkage to the Imagine Vine plan. We have the involvement of the Foundation for Excellence. The picture you're looking at here is an example of what was done between late 2014 and 2015 along Portage Street near Portage and between Washington and Stockbridge. So there is now, I believe there's 3 projecting signs on one side of the road and 3 on the other side. So it's quite a little cluster there, but that again is outside the downtown, and the current ordinance only allows projecting signs in the downtown. So they were in the same situation. It was the land bank working with the business owners at the time in the Washington Square area that brought about the variance requests in 2014 and 2015. So this slide here lays out the changes that we're going to make to the ordinance. As you can see, what's currently in the ordinance is very limiting as far as the 4 zone districts where we allow projecting signs. And when we update Chapter 50, we of course have to define a projecting sign and then put in the parameters that go with that projecting sign. So, and as was mentioned in the introduction of this item, that these are projecting signs that will be authorized for 7 businesses. And you'll notice a slight variation between the businesses, the business addresses and the parcel addresses. And that's because there is more than one, tenant space on some of the parcels. So that is, so that's a known quantity. If that question kind of came up for some as far as looking through the staff report. So again, here are the locations that we are focused on. And you can see a number of them are along Westnedge Avenue. We've got 3 that are on Vine. Well, 3 that are clustered on Vine near Westnedge, and then the last one is actually down by Locust and Vine. So that the parcel address is 722 Locust, but 804 is the tenant address for O'Duffy's Pub. So that's where you get some of that variation. And then, of course, these are some shots looking at the facade of the buildings right now, and the areas where these projecting signs will be placed. So that's, I just kind of wanted to run through, kind of a visual on things and talk about the businesses. And Christina already mentioned, she named all the businesses off, but we have Heirloom Arts. We have the barber shop at Vine. We have Sway Salon, O'Duffy's Pub, Crow's Nest, Puffin Stuff, and Martini's Pizza are all participating in the program. And as far as public feedback received, Steve Walsh from the Vine neighborhood, as well as the business owners, all signed a letter, which was forwarded to the board members earlier today. The one missing signature on there was from Martini's Restaurant, and there's an email from Rich Munda that covers that support. So the last thing I want to touch on is the review criteria for dimensional variance, just to help frame the situation a little bit better, because this should be treated just like any other variance request before the board. So the first review criteria is the special circumstances or conditions. And as was mentioned in the staff report, we laid out that part of the difficulty here is the placement of the buildings, similar to the Washington Square area. Most of these buildings are set up against the property line, which doesn't allow for the use of freestanding signs. All they've got is the wall sign allowance to work with. Those buildings that front on Westnedge are also faced with a very high traffic situation where it doesn't really do a customer any good to spot the business as they're driving by. They really need to see it in advance of reaching the building front, so they can start to react and find a parking space. So so the traffic on Westnedge and O'Duffy's Pub will benefit because they'll have something that will be visible looking down Locust Street that will be helpful. Number 2 of the criteria is the special circumstances are not the result of the actions of the applicant. Clearly, they're not. I mean, the city laid out a game plan for how this was going to be carried out throughout the year, and we had hoped to keep things on track. We had our staff working with the business owners to the point where the next step really is to design the signs and and then put those out for bid. So it progressed right along on that front. Unfortunately, the ordinance amendment work got more complicated than we anticipated. So the timing of the ordinance amendment is really the special circumstance that has now caused us to be before the board asking for this dimensional variance tonight. And number 3, the literal interpretation and enforcement of the terms and provisions of the ordinance would deprive the applicant of the rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same zone district. Now that's a difficult to lay it out in the same way it's worded. But basically, because projecting signs are not allowed in the CN1, this commercial neighborhood zone district, there's no use of projecting signs available to any of these business owners in this zone district. But this is, again, this is a temporary situation because the ordinance amendments will correct that circumstance. What I do want to also mention that this is a neighborhood node and it does reflect, similar character to the downtown with the zero setbacks, with the storefront windows and the high level of pedestrian traffic here. Let's see, number 4, the granting of the variance is the minimum action that will make possible the use of the land and structure that is not contrary to the public interest. This installation of projecting signs will not be contrary to the public interest. It is the minimum action that will allow this program to proceed forward. And, the only physical difference that's going to be notable is the signs, instead of running horizontal to the building facade, they will be perpendicular and project outward over the sidewalk. Number 5 is the granting of the variance will not adversely affect adjacent land. There is, no noted impact as far as, having these signs project outward over the sidewalk. All the signs will have to comply with the minimum sidewalk clearance of 8 feet. So they will be well above the sidewalk. And then number 6 is the granting the variance will be generally consistent with the purposes and intent of the ordinance. And, these projecting signs will be consistent with the intent of the ordinance and will, the signs will comply with the new sign regulations that we're going to put in place. So essentially this dimensional variance being granted tonight will no longer be necessary come spring, late spring of next year. So with that being said, the staff recommendation again is to approve the dimensional variance from chapter 7.2G to authorize projecting signs for each of the 7 locations listed. And with that, I will stop talking and see if there's any questions. Thank you.
No questions from me. Are there any questions from anyone?
The only thing I noticed when I read the variance request, and I'll be honest, I forgot to go look at the ordinance, the current ordinance, but I noticed that there's no height restriction. So there's 5 feet from the wall and 8 feet, no lower than 8 feet, which for a tall guy seems a little low. But nonetheless, I didn't see a height. And I wonder if that's a concern of the city, or I'm just throwing it out there.
That has not really been an issue. We don't allow for roof mounted signs. So if it still has to be mounted to the front facade of the building. And normally you want to mount it where it's more easily seen. So to place the sign really high. And of course, with projecting signs, they're usually not that large because you get into, how much space you have to project over the sidewalk before you get near the curb. You have to anchor, that sign projection off the building. So, the anchorage becomes more complicated the larger the sign is. So, that's where when we look at what's been done in the Washington Square area, those are in the range of 16 square feet. So typically your projecting sign isn't that large. I anticipate many of these businesses will still have a traditional wall sign in addition to a small projecting sign.
Thank you.
Hearing no other questions, we'll now open the public hearing. Have any comments come in?
There are no public comments at this time.
All right. Board, any other discussion before we move to the finding of fact? Any questions for Pete? No?
I think they're cute and everything, and I live in Vine, but I just think we should be using money for sidewalks because the sidewalks are atrocious, but that has nothing to do with anything. I do want to be on record saying that though.
Noted. All right, I'll now ask for a motion on the finding of fact, and I think you've got it tonight, Beth.
I move that the finding of fact for 509 West Vine Street, 722 Locust Street, 802, 816, 824, and 832 South Westnedge Avenue shall include all information included in the notice of public hearing dated November 3rd, 2021. 310 notices of public hearing were sent and 2 responses were received and are part of the record. A public hearing was held before the board and public comments were accepted. A letter of support was received from the Vine Neighborhood Association and business owners, and an email of support was received from Rich Munda of Martini's Restaurant. The finding of fact shall include those documents just described and also the facts and comments made during public hearing, which are summarized as follows. Mr. Eldridge, representing the city, spoke to the Vine Projecting Signs Project for 7 businesses in the Vine neighborhood. It's easier for motorists and pedestrians to identify the shops before they're upon them. It's obviously it's hard when you're going down Westnedge hunting for martinis and all of a sudden you've flown past it. There's no place to park. You're gone. Mr. Eldridge reviewed the dimensional requirements for the variance. And that's all I have.
All right. The one thing I would like to add to that would simply be that there is an intent from the city to amend this this projecting sign ordinance. And if that passes in the spring as anticipated, these would be permitted by right. Is there a second to the motion on the finding of fact or any other additions? Do we have a second?
I'll do it.
We have
Second.
a second from Jeff Carroll. All in favor of the approval of the motion on finding of fact signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. And now, Christina, can you do the motion for the approval of the zoning variance?
I make a motion to approve the variance from chapter 7, section 7.2G to authorize projecting signs for each of the following tenant spaces. 505 West Vine, 507 West Vine, 509 West Vine, 804 West Vine, 816 South Westnedge, 824 South Westnedge, 832 South Westnedge for the following businesses: Heirloom Arts, The Barber Shop at Vine, Sway Salon, O'Duffy's, Crow's Nest, Puff and Stuff, and Martini's Pizza.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
All right, the motion's on the table. It's our opportunity for discussion. So I think this is the second projecting sign variance request we have. If I recall right, we had one at Non-La Burger on Burdick. And I think the same rationale we had in that case applies here too. You know, the central business district properties have the right to this projecting sign, to put up projecting signs in these core neighborhoods, whether it's Edison with non-Leberger or Vine. We have these zero setback or sidewalk setback businesses. And as we indicated, you know, it's hard for them to have visibility. I think that looking at the factors, special circumstances are not the cause, but not caused by the business. This is probably the minimal thing that can be done to, you know, allow these businesses to have signage that's useful for them. Since there's a proposed ordinance amendment coming, I think that all businesses will have this right eventually, and it seems just practical to allow this to proceed since there's been some investment in both getting to an amendment in this and putting this together with the business owners in Vine. So I'll be in favor. Any other discussion tonight? Hearing none. Pete, can you run the roll call vote?
Let's start with Ms. Doan,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
Flaw,
Yes.
Vanden Hamburg,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
and Chair Lager.
Yes. The motion carries. And that
Thank
is that's our only agenda item tonight. So with that, we are adjourned.
That is correct. And like I said, I will keep everybody advised on the December 9th agenda. But it really has one public hearing, and then there's one other review and approval for a variance extension. But I will send an email well in advance to give you the heads up, but it should be a pretty straightforward meeting. And I will not be present, but we will have staff there to answer all your questions. All right, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Pete. Night, everyone.
Thank
Good
you,
night,
Pete.
everybody.
Have a nice Thanksgiving.
Oh, happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Indigenous peoples. All that stuff.
Thank you, Robbie.
Yes, bye.